The USPS moves 55,000 truckloads of mail every single day, nearly 2 billion miles a year. That's not just a logistics operation. That's one of the largest ground transportation networks in the entire country. And most people have no idea it exists. Because when you think about the post office, you think about the little truck on your street, the guy in the blue uniform dropping off your packages. But behind that, there's an enormous highway network of semi-trucks, contracted carriers, and third-party logistics companies moving mail across the country around the clock. This is the Los Angeles Processing and Distribution Center, the single largest mail processing center in the entire country. We're talking about a building that processes 30 million packages during the holiday season alone. Mail coming in from every direction, sorted and pushed back out onto trucks heading across the country. And there are facilities like this in every major city. New York, Detroit, Chicago, Dallas, running around the clock 365 days a year. All of them dependent completely on one thing: trucks moving between them constantly. 55,000 loads, nearly 2 billion miles a year. That's the scale we're talking about. And for years, a significant portion of drivers moving mail between these facilities have been operating on something called a non-domiciled CDL. A non-domiciled CDL is one that's been issued to someone who doesn't actually live in the state that gave them the license. In a lot of cases, these are foreign nationals, people who actually aren't U.S. residents who obtained a commercial license through the U.S. licensing agencies. But here's where things get messy. The process for issuing these licenses hasn't been well monitored for a long time, and federal audits have flagged gaps in the vetting. There have been questions about whether the people holding these licenses have actually met the traditional standards required. And in some cases, those gaps have shown up in the form of hours of service violations and fatal crashes. Now, this is an actual audit from the USPS Office of Inspector General. These reports have been flagging contractors' oversight gaps for years. And the language in here is pretty direct. The system had some holes in it, and the USPS, for a long time, didn't have a great handle on exactly how many of these drivers were inside of their network. And that's when things started to change around September of 2025, when the FMCSA issues an emergency rule restricting states from issuing CDLs to foreign domiciled individuals without stricter oversight. Then, in January 2026, USPS follows up with an announcement of their own. They're going to phase out the use of non-domiciled CDL drivers who haven't been thoroughly vetted and cleared by the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. The Postal Inspection Service, for context, is essentially the law enforcement arm of the USPS. These are federal agents, and having them screen and badge drivers is a meaningful step from what the actual baseline was before. The chairwoman of the USPS Board of Governors calls it about safety, and the U.S. Postmaster General calls it about strengthening reliability. And honestly, their stated reasoning is very legitimate. But here's the part that tells you a lot about how the situation actually developed. Before the January announcement for the formal phase-out plan, USPS actually tried to just flip the switch. Back in late of October of 2025, they briefly halted the loading of trailers operated by non-domiciled CDL drivers. Just stopped, effective immediately. And it broke things almost instantly. Canceled loads, missed trips, delayed sorting facilities across the country, the kind of chaos you get when you pull off a load-bearing piece of a system without fully understanding how load-bearing it actually is. Remember, it's 55,000 loads a day. Even a small percentage of disruption to that is thousands of missed loads. Millions of pieces of mail just sitting still. Because here's what USPS found out in real time. They had massively underestimated how many of their contracted drivers were operating on non-domiciled CDLs. The guy running the logistics, Peter Raudasalis, Chief Logistics Officer, he got on a call with suppliers and basically admitted it out loud.
We've also got recording from Pete Raudasalis, who has said, quote, we didn't understand the magnitude of how many people are using non-domiciled CDLs, suggesting that attempted to stop this practice, but realized that there are too many drivers who are using these non-domiciled CDLs, so it wasn't, I guess, practicable to enforce that particular ruling.
We didn't quite understand the magnitude of how many people were using non-domiciled CDLs. So they reversed course, gave everyone more time, said they'd work with contracted providers to phase things out gradually. Which brings us to now. April 16th, 2026, Rollout sends a formal letter to all suppliers. Effective May 1st, any non-domiciled CDL driver who has not been screened and badged by the Postal Inspection Service is not allowed to transport mail. Suppliers are responsible for getting their drivers through that clearance process. If a driver isn't vetted, they don't work USPS loads. And carriers have roughly 2 weeks to make that happen, or had 2 weeks to make that happen, or find replacement drivers. They had just 2 weeks, now it's roughly a week. And for a network moving 55,000 loads a day, that's tough. Now, the goal here is genuinely responsible. Tighter vetting, better responsibility, a paper trail for who's operating inside one of our most crucial logistics networks in the country. It makes sense. But the pressure this creates on the contractor side is real, and it's landing at a very difficult moment. The pool of available drivers was already shrinking before this policy even hit. One of USPS major contracted carriers, a company called 10 Roads Express, shut down earlier this year after losing key contracts. That's not a small disruption. That's thousands of trucks and drivers being pulled off the market all at once. So you've got fewer drivers available overall, and you've got a hard deadline fast approaching. And now you've got carriers who need to either get existing drivers through a federal screening process in just a matter of business days, or find vetted replacements in a market that's already stretched very thin. That's a complicated combination inside of a network that does not have a lot of room for error. And look, USPS isn't wrong that this needed to happen. Inspector General reports have been raising flags about this for a while. Vetting gaps, safety violations, crashes. The underlying problem is real, but there's a pattern here worth noticing. They tried to do this in October and it immediately caused service failures at scale. They didn't fully understand the scope of their own reliance on these drivers until they actually tried to remove them from their network. And now they're back at the same kind of hard deadline with just a few more days of runway. The question isn't really whether vetting drivers is a good idea. Of course it is. I don't think anyone's denying that. The question is whether the 2-week hard cutoff inside an already strained contractor network during a period where USPS is facing serious cost and service pressures already, whether that's actually going to go smoothly this time, we'll know pretty quickly in just a few days after May 1st. Because when you're moving 55,000 truckloads a day across nearly 2 billion miles of American highway, the margin for things to go sideways is thin. And the post office has already shown us once that it didn't fully understand what it was dealing with. Here's hoping the second attempt goes better than the first. Thank you so much for watching. If you like videos like this, please consider checking out our last video that we did on how New York lost $73 million in federal funding because of their CDL problem.